Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Bisrat for Africa. So, there was someone in the comment section who asked a very interesting question. Since we've been dealing with exposing cults, talking about things like how Ubungoma is a cult and how there's human sacrifice that is practiced there, there's a very interesting stat that says 50% of all babies that are kidnapped in the hospital are actually going to be used for traditional medicine. This means that out of the superstition or the belief that if a woman can't fall pregnant, they basically will drink umuti that's made out of a dead child, and that will make them fertile. There's lots of cases, albinos being killed. There's lots of reports. Even the UNICEF actually came out and mentioned all across Africa, almost all the tribes, talking about how people use other people's human body parts for human sacrifice and for traditional medicine. There's also someone who was a Sangoma who exposed this and actually said that we were using human body parts for traditional medicine. Now, this basically means that every time you buy umut, right, you are contributing to human sacrifice. Now, a lot of people obviously feel that, some of them feel offended by this, but the person who commented in the comment section wasn't necessarily saying these practices are good, but they were saying, well, let me just read it for you. He basically said, wasn't Jesus a sacrifice? Thereon, don't Christians therefore repeatedly partake of the Holy Communion to reaffirm the sacrifice? If we're going to umbrella the good and the bad in Ubungoma, let's umbrella the good and the bad in Christianity. Why I disagree with Christianity is its tendency to want to superimpose its being over every other. My advice to Christians: promote, sell Christ, not discredit other religions. Lastly, God is not a Christian. Okay, the God is not a Christian. I'm not even going to respond to that because this is like saying Buddha is a Buddhist. So I'm not even going to respond to that one. But the point is about the sacrifice of Christ. So is the nature of the sacrifice of Christ similar to someone killing a baby, turning the baby into umuti for selfish gain, to be able to prosper or for, to try and fix their situation? Something that's purely out of selfish gain. Can we compare that with the nature of the sacrifice of Christ? So number one, in looking at the nature of the sacrifice of Christ, we've got to look at verses like John chapter 10, verse 18. Jesus himself says this: no one takes my life from me, or no one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. Right away, we can see that the little babies that are being sacrificed in the hospital, they don't get to volunteer. They don't get to choose. But Jesus says, no one takes it from me. I lay it down on my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down and the authority to take it up. And what Jesus is saying is, because I am God, right? So it's not just a human sacrifice. It is God sacrificing himself, or God giving his life towards us. And so you can't even term it as a human sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that comes from divine authority. And the willingness for Jesus to lay down his life is also the fact that he knows that he can take it up again, right? But the little babies can't restore their lives, right? So they're gone. We can't actually say we can bring them back, right? This is the point that we need to focus on here. Jesus saying, I have the authority to take it up again. Now, basically, this shows us that Jesus is not the victim of the circumstances that are actually around him, but Jesus is in control of everything. He decides that he's going to come to the world. He decides that he's going to lay down his life, and he knows that he'll be able to resurrect his life, right? So is this the same thing? Absolutely not. And we've also got to understand the purpose of the sacrifice. What's the purpose of someone going to dig up a grave and try and take someone's human body parts, or go to a mortuary and try and dig up somebody's, liver or whatever it is to try and make a mood? What is the purpose? The purpose is purely for selfish gain. And that's what Ubungoma pretty much promotes or offers to people, right? So you've got Jesus who wants to offer life. And if you go to John chapter 3:16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." So he gives his life so that we would have life. But when someone takes the life of a young person or a little baby or whoever, they're doing it for death. Death is the ultimate goal on the one side, but life is on the other. On the other side, life is the ultimate goal. In other words, what Jesus offers us is through his death that we would become, alive. There's also a verse that says he became poor so that we would become rich. So this is completely different to someone who wants to become rich at the expense of someone else. Here we have someone who becomes poor and makes you rich spiritually, at their expense. This is completely different. This is actually an example that all of us should be following. And you must remember that Jesus is the only person that could have fulfilled this mission. It's the same that, if you had a solution that could solve the problems of the world, and you were the only person who qualified, imagine if you just chose, no, I'm not going to do it. Right? That would actually be selfish of you to not knowing that Jesus is the only perfect sacrifice, that can fulfill the justice and the wrath of God and to demonstrate that mercy. If he sat back, that would be selfish, actually. That would be equal to almost killing or allowing humanity to die. It's basically what they're asking him is to actually watch while humanity dies. But Jesus, because he's full of love, he's full of mercy, he couldn't watch. He couldn't stand and watch. He was willing to give his life. And that's why if you look at Romans chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." This means that Christ didn't wait for us to be perfect, but actually he came to us when we were at our worst, at our lowest, and he came in to our low state. He came into the fire. That's the beautiful thing about the God of the Bible, is that he doesn't shy away from the fire. He steps into the fire with us. He steps into the grave with us, right? So that he would raise us up out of the grave. There is a greater purpose. Now, you can't compare this to the dark practices that we see of people, being killed, abducted, kidnapped, all for the sake of prosperity, all for the sake of money. When people, batwale, where they take all these things called this gobu so that they would prosper, there's always a warning that someone might die. That's what Ugogo Skoteni said, that Sangomas always warn these people that someone in your family will die. But people, because they are obsessed with themselves, obsessed with prosperity, they still continue and do it. Now, you have to understand, this is why Christianity for me is so good for Africa, is so good for the world, because what Jesus Christ does is he actually inspired even the apostles. The apostles, when they started preaching the gospel and preaching the truth, there were people who were opposing the truth. And the apostles could have said, well, these people are opposing the truth. They're powerful. They could take my life. I could just be silent, right? And that's what we can also do in life. When we see someone bullying someone, do we go and stand up for them, knowing that that could put our lives in danger, right? Do we stand up for the truth? Are we willing to sacrifice for the greater good of other people? And that's why all the liberation movements are born outside of the church, is because people understood this idea that the best definition that we can define love by is to say, it's me basically willing to sacrifice my life for yours. It's my life for yours, right? Love always calls us to give up something in order to express love. That's why we see even the liberation movements, people like Robert Sobukwe, right, who was a Christian. He gave his life to liberate people, and he was willing to go to prison, something that cost him his life, but because he knew it was for the greater good, he was willing to do it, right? What about even in America, the slave abolition movements? Sojourner Truth was somebody who was willing to give her life to liberate people from slavery. What about Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement? He gave that famous speech, I have a dream, and something that cost him his life. Now Martin Luther King Jr. could have just sat and done nothing, right? And just be comfortable and watch these people being oppressed and all these sort of things. But because he understood the sacrifice that Jesus Christ had done for him, he understood the love that Christ had demonstrated for him, and he wanted to go and do it for others. And that's what First John chapter 3:16 says. We should also be willing to sacrifice for other people, right? Following that example for Christ, right? To give up our comfort in order to be able to help other people. So you can't actually compare these two things. In fact, the other one is motivated by selfish gain, and the other one is motivated by love. It's motivated by mercy. Its end goal is to produce life. It's to produce redemption. This is Bisrat for Africa. Hope you guys have enjoyed that analysis, and also encouraging you guys to keep bringing these questions, because I think that all of us can learn from the discussion. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we do encourage the engagement. So please keep asking the questions, and I'm going to respond more and more to the questions in the comment section, but also continuing on the subject of cult. We'll see you guys on the next video.